Well, I definitely didn't think we would find ourselves here, but this is 2026, and it appears the fate of regulatory clarity in crypto may hinge on a fight between bankers. If your only hope is that the banker wars result in more dollars being pumped into the crypto markets, or if you're finding value in these videos, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies DRep address and the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. All right. Thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining, everybody. If you could pay attention, I'm doing another little countdown test. If you could pay attention to what the number was, or if you did pay attention to what the number was when you could hear the audio and see the video, I'd appreciate it. Just put that in the comments. Appreciate it very much. If you're listening live, if you're listening after the live episode, don't worry about it. So anyways, let's see who's here. Let's see who's here. We've got Neo Chad. Neo Chad was here first. Crypto crash again. Who cares? Yeah, that's basically where I'm at. That's basically how I feel about it right now. D9U's here. Well, hello. Well, hello there, beautiful crypto peeps. How are your bags holdings? Good question. Brian Packard, good evening. Hilldog is here. Thanks for saying that, Hilldog. Appreciate it. Eric Williams is here. Let's go. Let's go. Developing down, averaging down more. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Pucky Hawk is here. Hello. I haven't checked my bags. I will in like a month. Laugh out loud. That's about where I am. That's about how I feel. Otis Frichov is here. Popcorn. Banker wars. The irony is they both will lose. Then it's our turn. Let's go. I hope so. I hope so. Raz is here. Raz, yo. Thanks for joining. Flying Hambones has just sold my house and moved 600 miles and finally settled in with family, just waiting for cash to clear so I can buy the dip. Wow. Wow. The selling of the house and buying the dip with the house. This is a bold move, very bold move. I hope that pays off for you. I have no idea what's going to happen, but I hope that pays off for you. Hilldog says buy the midnight dip. Otis Fricho says, I quit trying to time the dips. I just DCA from now on. Yeah, I've been in the DCA camp for years and years for sure. But I've always been happy though when my DCAs coincided with the lower price. I've never not bought those DCAs. Wife can't wait for your alien videos. Thank you, Army. Ooh, there's some spicy stuff on the alien for an alien video right now. I would love to do that. I hope I can do that. I hope I can do that soon because there's some very spicy stuff that actually just came out tonight. Troll Toll, hello. Thanks for joining. Flying Hambone says, I have more midnight than I need. Laugh out loud. Just waiting on it to launch. I'm not really timing. I just have no cash at the moment. Laugh out loud. Yep, I know how that feels. Michael says, let's go. Hey, did you notice a Twitter DM about real services on the ADA block? I'll check. I'll check that. If you send that DM to me, I'll thank you for sending it. And I'll definitely check. Jay Marie says, howdy. Let's go. Mr. iWebCode DMS. Oh, welcome back. Let's go. Thanks for joining. Otis Frichov says 26. Okay, nice. Joe Davidson's here. Streetwise says 26. Okay, that's great. You guys, I think we started at 30, so that means you only missed like 4 seconds. It's great. I like that Ouroboros snake eating countdown logo animation you use. Yep, I also thought about that when I saw the timer. Another body in the floor, another falling knife. Let's see if I get some entry points. It is war, gentlemen. It is. Another 26. Okay, this is great. Tonight, people only missed a few seconds of the countdown, so that's a good sign. I think we can safely keep the countdown timer pretty short. But can the banks fight a Hydra? This is a good question. Okay, Michael was saw 24 seconds, 26 seconds, 24 seconds. Blue Mammal, thanks for joining. Dr. Doak says, hey all, happy Monday. Cardano, Bitcoin, Night, FLDT. What is FLDT? Severed Tom Cardiac is here. Hi. Okay, so obviously we saw some interesting things since we last talked on Thursday. There was a little bit more I don't really want to call it speculation because it's actually just like true observations about who's really fighting this Clarity Act war, right? It's sort of been positioned, certainly the most notable of the two combatants on the crypto side, sort of in favor of the crypto side, I'll put it that way, is Coinbase and Brian Armstrong, right? Coinbase and Brian Armstrong definitely appear to be the most sort of notable, you know, combatants on the crypto side. On the anti-Clarity Act side, we sort of like generically paint, the bankers as being on the opposite side. People will always go to JP Morgan Chase because Jamie Dimon has been such a vocal sort of detractor from crypto over the years. Now he's kind of flipped over a new leaf. He's talking very positively about crypto, but he's the kind of guy, I definitely don't pay attention to what he says. I pay attention to what he does because JP Morgan Chase has been doing a lot of crypto stuff for many, many years, and he's only flipping over now and talking positively. So we don't really know. But there were some interesting observations. So let's look at a few things. So first of all, on Friday, a lot of the news, a lot of the good sort of updates about what was happening in the Clarity Act came from the account of this person who we're going to look at some of her tweets in just a second, but she also did a show on Friday where she had the heads of policy of both Coinbase and Kraken. Very interesting. If you want to hear what the heads of policy of Coinbase and Kraken were saying on Friday about the Clarity Act, this was very enlightening to hear it directly from them. So these weren't the CEOs of those two platforms. These were the heads of policy. So it's very interesting to hear it directly from them. So I'd say check out that podcast if you want to hear the Coinbase and Kraken heads talking about these same issues. But more importantly, this came out. So we saw this on Friday, and this kind of kicked off a little drama. I don't even want to call it drama, but just a little back and forth, we'll call it. So Eleanor Terrett said, "Scoop, the White House is considering pulling its support for the crypto market structure bill entirely if Coinbase does not come back to the table with a yield agreement that satisfies the banks and gets everyone to a deal." A source close to the Trump administration tells me the White House is said to be furious. Notice she used the word furious. The White House is said to be furious with Coinbase's unilateral action on Wednesday, which apparently was not notified of advance, calling it a rug pull against the White House and the rest of the industry. The White House does not believe that one company speaks for the entire industry. The source continued, "This is President Trump's bill at the end of the day, not Brian Armstrong's." And you remember what happened on Wednesday. Brian Armstrong came out and said, "Hey, we don't like the way things are going for these." He had a little bullet point list of 5 things, 4 or 5 things. The last thing on the list was stablecoin yield, even though we all knew that was kind of the most important thing. And he had other things in there like tokenization, these kinds of things. But it was obvious Coinbase was out. They were walking away from supporting the bill. Sub-Zero makes a good point here. 48 hours after the markup is without notice. Yeah, and especially when the markup, industry hadn't seen a markup of the bill since something like September. So they took months and months and months and months to negotiate and draft up this draft. And then it was sort of like dropped in all of our laps on Monday night. Everybody's scrambling, even just to understand what's in the bill. I mean, pretty much simultaneously, everybody trying to understand the bill like me was going through it on Tuesday. The senators who weren't necessarily a part of the negotiations kind of also had all of Tuesday to go through it, and they had a 5 p.m. deadline on Tuesday to get their amendments in. And then, by Wednesday, I think that's actually a pretty quick turnaround. I mean, this, it's hard to say who this bill would affect more than Coinbase and Kraken. By Wednesday, Coinbase was just like, "Look, we're out. There's too much in here. We can't say we support this bill for this markup that's going to happen tomorrow." And they were right. This bill was sort of being shoved down the throat of crypto. And it was just like, "Oh, you've wanted regulatory clarity all these years. Fine, here it is. Take it or leave it. We're going to mark this up tomorrow." So probably would have happened if Coinbase, if Brian Armstrong hadn't made that tweet saying they're pulling their support. That markup would have happened. That's what delayed the whole thing. but I think he was right. And we talked a lot last week. We're not going to rehash all the reasons why I think the bill sucked. My reasons were different than Coinbase's reasons. But the bigger problem was just that nobody was involved in the negotiation of this bill. And then it's like sort of dropped in everybody's laps on a Monday. And then they're going to just like finish everything off by Thursday. There was still the ag committee part of it that wasn't going to happen until next week from now anyways. But you know, it was one of those things where they were sort of like, hey, you guys have been asking for this for like literally a decade and a half. We're just going to give it to you. We're going to give you 4 days to look it over, 3 days, and you're just going to accept it. This is all you get. So I'm kind of glad that Coinbase did what they did so that all of crypto can have a second chance. Hilldog says, I delegate and stake with AOS. I hope you all do. Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that, Hilldog. I appreciate it. Flying Hambone says, I stake with AOS. A small payment for this awesome channel. Great info. Thank you. Thank you for saying that, Flying Hambone. I appreciate it. Mark Going says, good evening. Just joined. Have you commented on Charles's video today? Love to get your analysis on it. Not tonight. I'm not going to talk about that video tonight, but probably tomorrow. Just because there were too many items for today. Charles would like use to join him in the fight for crypto. What do you think about having a friendly marketing competition with the Cardano community? Teach each other some new skills along the way. Were you saying Charles would like us to join him in the fight for? Okay, I'll have to watch the video. I haven't watched the video yet, just because there were so many things. I was kind of saving it tomorrow. I try not to like watch Charles video and then comment on it a full, sort of like 36 hours later. I like to watch it the same day I'm going to talk about it, so I'm kind of saving it till tomorrow. Brian Packard, thank you. Brian says hit the likes to get this out. Thank you, I appreciate that. Idioclip says using AI to produce the ads, weekly challenge by topic like programming languages. Oh, this sounds great. Yeah, that sounds great. That sounds fantastic. Where is crypto's Duke Nukem? Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good question. Okay, so Eleanor Tarrant came out with this. She's saying, and the most important part is probably this, the White House is said to be furious with Coinbase's unilateral action. Then we got Brian, who came out and said very politely, Brian Armstrong, at least on Twitter, in public on social media, seems to be a very, very polite kind of guy. But then again, if you started building a crypto app in your apartment and then you became a billionaire, you'd probably be pretty happy about life and pretty polite too. Being polite is probably a luxury you can afford, right? So he says, in general, love your posts, but this is not accurate. The White House has been super constructive here. They did ask us to see if we can go figure out a deal with the banks, which we're currently working on. Actually, we've been cooking up some good ideas on how we can help the community banks, specifically in this bill, since that's what this is about. The community banks, right? More coming soon. You can tell this last part is dripping with sarcasm. He does not believe it's about the community banks. He knows that very well, and he's pointing that out sarcastically here. He's saying this is not about community banks. Community banks are the red herring that the big banks are throwing up because of all the reasons we talked about last week. That gigantic delta between the yield they get off treasury securities right now and what they're paying you, right? They want that money. They don't want to have to compete with stablecoin yields, which are going to be a much smaller delta for a platform like Coinbase. So he knows what he's pointing out, but it's super interesting. As soon as I saw this, I had a suspicion I knew exactly what happened here. If you've ever managed a bunch of people or been in an organization, been in like a division of a company where there's a lot of people and there's like, drama inside the division, what happens a lot of the time, what I always found out when I got to the bottom of stuff like this, it was always the case that both parties, like they're telling two different stories. Eleanor Tarrant is saying the White House is furious with Coinbase, and Brian Armstrong is saying, no, that's not accurate. They're not furious with us. They just asked us to work on some stuff. Whenever I saw this kind of stuff go down in organizations, and I'm not, this is like loosely kind of an organizational issue, even though we're not talking about one organization, what always turned out to be the case is that the party who goes to like person A, Brian Armstrong, and is actually super furious with them and is like, hey, I need you to fix the following things. They explain it to the Brian Armstrong character exactly like he's describing. They did ask us to see if we can do blank thing, if we can go fix blank thing. That's always how that person explains it to person A. And then When they talk to unrelated person B about it, Eleanor Terrett, they're going to say stuff like, we're furious with person A, right? They never say it to person B, who's not the subject of their anger, the same way they say it to person A, right? They're going to say it much more, they're going to tone it down a huge amount to person A, and then they're going to give, either a really exaggerated version or a much more accurate version to person B, who's not the subject of their ire, right? So I think that's exactly what happened here. Probably Brian Armstrong is being fairly accurate about the way they express this to him. And probably Eleanor Terrett is also being fairly accurate about the way they explained it to her. It could have even been two different people at the White House. It could be that, the White House had some meeting. The White House crypto people had some meeting as soon as they saw this tweet from Brian, and they assigned whoever was dealing with Brian and Coinbase. They were like, hey, go tell him this, right? Tell him he's got to fix this. He's got to work on this item. And that person went and talked to Brian Armstrong. And then Eleanor Terrett might have talked to somebody else who was in that meeting who was like, yeah, we're furious with Coinbase over this. So they're probably both being accurate, right? They were probably just given two very different accounts of the White House's position, which is what I would expect in this situation, right? It's like if you're super pissed at somebody, if you're like an emotionally disciplined person, you're probably not gonna express that super high anger level to that person. But if you're talking to a third party, you might express that anger. So I think that's what's going on here. Okay. It was great and relevant to build on Cardano 2026. Okay. Benjamin says, let's fucking go, Spies. Market down, spirits high. Yep, that's how I always feel. People trying to show face. Yep. James Syracuse. Oh, I like that little. Is that like a house? Is that like a YouTube logo with a roof over it? I like that. That's great. At least that's the way it's showing up for me. Maybe it's not supposed to be that way, but that's the way it's showing up for me as a little YouTube logo with a house over it. You guys probably can't see it because we got a black background behind the comments on the screen. But so that's what Brian came back with. Then we saw Eleanor come back with this. My reporting was airtight and accurate. You also just cited the central point of my story as correct, that the White House asked Coinbase to go secure a deal on yield. My reporting is that the White House support now appears to be contingent on that outcome. Brian Armstrong, you'd think Brian Armstrong usually I don't see him get into a lot of back and forth on social media, but he seemed to really care about this because almost immediately within an hour, he came back with this. The old infographic about the elephant. One blind person thinks the trunk is a snake. Another blind person thinks the tail is a rope. Another person, thinks the torso is a wall. So he's basically saying she doesn't know what the hell is going on. She thinks she's sensing, the White House being furious, but that's because she's blind. She doesn't see like Brian Armstrong sees, that kind of thing. And it could be somebody in the White House just leaked that to her to put extra pressure on Brian Armstrong, and maybe they're not actually furious. That's always possible. James Syracuse says it's time to kick ass and chew bubblegum, and I'm all out of bubblegum. Yep. Omar Wright, greetings. Thank you for joining. Elliot Adams says we could all chill in Carta Station one day. Ooh, I'm down. Yeah, okay, we should do this. We'll have to tell Joyous Testimony that we're coming. I think we can make that one happen. I think we can make that happen sometime. I would like to do that. It's livestreaming that can be a little clunky, and it's not Carta Station. It's just being live in game, doing a live stream, the streaming platform I'm using. It's all of it together. You're like stacking. It's kind of like a stacking tolerances issue. It's like things go wrong. It's not necessarily Carta Station's fault or problem, but it's streaming it that's the problem. But we should do that. This I would also love to do, of course. I've got to get a machine capable of capable of running Infinity Rising. I'm on the wrong OS for that, guys. I'm on the wrong OS, but one day I will buy a machine just for Infinity Rising. The next machine I buy I will be sure it works with Infinity Rising if all goes well. Mr. iWebCode DMS says everything is security. No, thank you. Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of reasons. We won't rehash it right now, but there were a lot of reasons outside of Coinbase's reasons for opposing that bill. Just as members of, the crypto space, just as regular people in crypto, retail people like us in crypto, there were a lot of reasons to oppose it. Even if you don't give a damn about, Coinbase and Kraken being able to get their yield. There were a lot of, 23 seconds. Okay, great. Okay, that's only about 7 seconds. So it looks like shortening the countdown timer the way I did was okay. So I think we can make it even shorter. We'll see how it goes tomorrow. Okay. So then this news came out, right? And this was so predictable. This was so predictable to me, right? Trump made a campaign promise to get this whole crypto regulatory clarity thing done, right? I'm just going to call that a campaign promise. You can quibble with me about his exact words or whatever. That's fine. But I'm going to say he made a campaign promise to get crypto regulatory clarity done. And it became apparent the other party he needs to get on the same page here with us are the banks, right? And so all of a sudden, out of the blue, we see Trump says he will be suing JP Morgan Chase over the next 2 weeks over debanking him after January 6th, after J6, right? And I'm like, Trump's been in office for quite a while here. He could have done this at any time, right? Is it any coincidence that right now, when he needs probably Jamie Dimon's cooperation on this bill, is it any coincidence that now he's threatening that? You notice he hasn't filed anything as far as I know. He's just threatening it, right? Just like this information was leaked to Eleanor Terrett. I'm assuming that's what happened, that the White House was furious with Coinbase. And that's not nothing. If you're Coinbase and you're sort of a creature of regulatory control, if you live and die by, avoiding the sword of the SEC, if you're Brian Armstrong running Coinbase, you don't want a pissed off White House. You don't want the White House to be furious with you. That's a problem because they control the executive branch, and the SEC is a part of the executive branch, right? It's an executive agency. So this is some significant pressure on both of them because Trump's got a good point, right? With the Supreme Court that is it's very possible the Supreme Court is going to be sympathetic to these types of claims about debanking, right? We all know about Operation Choke Point 2.0. He's basically threatening an Operation Choke Point 2.0 lawsuit against JP Morgan Chase. This is a big deal for JP Morgan Chase. So he's definitely putting pressure on both sides. Like, hey, Brian, I need you to cave a little bit. Hey, JP Morgan Chase, Jamie Dimon, I know you'll never admit to caving over anything, but we can definitely make things difficult on you, if we sue you over this debanking thing. Because if you think about it, if there's some kind of an Operation Choke Point 2.0 suit that's successful against JP Morgan Chase, all the other banks that participated in the Operation Choke Point 2.0 stuff, that would set a precedent. And, every other plaintiff who might have gotten caught up in Operation Choke Point 2.0 is going to use that precedent as part of their case. So it's not even like the damages they might encounter from a Trump claim. It's just the precedent it would set, right? So seems like this is Trump trying to get this deal done. I'm in a way, like, I don't want him to pressure Coinbase to compromise. Of course, I want crypto to get everything we can, but at the same time, I'm kind of glad to see that Trump is really trying to get this thing done. He's not just like, oh well, we couldn't fulfill that campaign promise. Sorry guys. This is just like negotiating a truce between Russia and Ukraine. We're just going to let that one slide. Forget about that one. Doesn't seem like he's doing that. It seems like he's going for it and he really wants to do a deal here. So this is good news. I think this is good news. Jay Marie says, the best part about Cardano is we are about to start earning some revenue. Staking rewards on ADA, night, and dust emissions. Earn, baby, earn. I hope we do. I sure hope we do. Great analogy. I'm pretty sure it's a rope. The banks want to give us plenty to hang the crypto community with. Good point. I smell foul play with Elliot. Are you talking about Eleanor? Are you talking about Eleanor Terrett? Foul play? Could be. Okay. So here's another really valid point. So Simon Dixon, who is a Bitcoin person, you've probably, if you've been around a while, you've probably seen his videos. He's not a newcomer to crypto. Let me put it that way. So thanks, Hildog. I appreciate you saying that. Thanks. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You meant Eleanor, definitely. But yeah, thanks for saying that. I appreciate it. This is a really good point. Simon Dixon pointed out, don't believe the theater. The crypto lobby is not as powerful as the banking lobby. Coinbase is aligned with another power. And he's not just being conspiratorial here, right? He says, in a nutshell, it's JP Morgan versus BlackRock. This is obviously Brian Armstrong of Coinbase and Larry Fink of BlackRock. In a nutshell, it's JP Morgan versus BlackRock, and Trump and Coinbase are representing greater powers. Fink and Dimon, so he's saying Larry Fink of BlackRock and Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan Chase are the ones who are really negotiating. The White House and Coinbase are just kind of, the puppets who are the public face of this, and actually, this is a pretty good point. It sounds conspiratorial, but when you think about how much these two entities have under management, like Coinbase only has it's something really low, like a third of a billion. Coinbase only has like a third of a billion AUM. BlackRock has 13 trillion, depending on who's counting, somewhere between, whatever, 10 and 13. And when you counted, but it's such an absurd amount of assets under management. It's an incredible amount of money that this one man is managing. It's incredible. So the way I would sort of think about this, it's not like people try to get really conspiratorial about this and they say, like the guys like him are just making a call to the Oval Office and things happen. I don't think it's really like that. I think it's more like a guy like him has a veto on certain types of futures, right? It's like, we all know where a lot of the big corporate movements came from, DEI, the environmental sustainability governance stuff, all of that stuff, it kind of came from one place. This is an entity and a person who can make big things like that happen just sort of on a whim, right? I don't think it's not I can call the White House, I can call the Oval Office and demand X and X thing will happen. It's not really like that, but it is a person who has a little bit of a veto on certain futures, right? If they own so many things, like I think it's like a single digit percentage share of the equity of Coinbase, right? But they have their fingers in every single company. If they want to go to all those boards and say, hey, we really need you to do the following acronym, right? It could be DEI, could be environmental sustainability governance, they just come up with an acronym and they're like, this is the big new thing. Everybody needs to get on board. We're pushing this big new thing. And all the companies get on board, right? So when BlackRock decided they loved Bitcoin, I was like, this is great. This is great for crypto because when it comes to crypto's future, he's not going to veto a crypto future. Jamie Dimon is the one who's going to try to veto a crypto future, but BlackRock is a little bit bigger player. And it makes sense that they're on opposite sides on this. Jamie Dimon, where's all the revenue coming from? It's banking, right? It's like straight up banking. Huge amount of revenue from not paying that spread, not paying a tiny sliver of that delta between what they're getting from putting your money into, treasuries, basically getting that treasury yield versus what they're paying you in your Chase savings account. That's where Chase is getting money from that. Chase is receiving that revenue. BlackRock is, holding, what is it right now? 800,000 Bitcoin. Like BlackRock wants that crypto future. Jamie Dimon does not. So in a way, as much as you hate to say it, BlackRock's kind of on our side on this one. So, as bad or as good as you think that is, that's probably really the case. Joe Davidson says all this infrastructure for a droplet of market cap in comparison. It's like Fort Knox guarding a roll of dimes. Good. Yeah, good call. Simon Dixon was very supportive during Celsius debacle. Okay, I didn't know that. Good to know. Doesn't BlackRock have a 10% stake in USDC? I know their stake in Coinbase proper is like, I saw different figures. I looked it up and people reporting different numbers, like 7%, 6%. What's their stake in Circle? I don't know. You're probably right. Probably something like that, I would imagine. Tyson, I think that's Tyson. I knew Cockcoin Ada sounds silly, but the fried chicken franchise with the big blue rooster mascot is bull. Okay. Mission Zambia, good morning. Thanks for joining. Benjamin says, need to remember that Trump's allegiance is to the U.S. dominance. Prior to making promises about crypto, he's quoted as being against anything that threatens the dollar. Yeah, that's true. I mean, the problem with somebody who jumps on board crypto or Bitcoin very quickly is they could jump off board just as quickly, right? Like, Trump, obviously his sons are, they're like balls deep in crypto for sure. His sons are balls deep in crypto. So that's helpful. That's super helpful. Larry Fink, could he become disenchanted with crypto? Yeah, I mean, he's become disenchanted with some of those acronyms. He made every goddamn company in the world create, whole departments around. He became disenchanted with those and he was like, oh, it's 2024. We're off that now. We're just off that. We're not doing that anymore. And everybody's like, yo, we built a whole department around this stuff. And he's like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. I mean, any of these parties that jump on so easily, they could jump off the train just as easily, which is kind of problematic for crypto. Dorian, good morning. Good morning. Thanks for joining. Appreciate you being here. So anyways, for now though, BlackRock seems to be on our side. Jamie Dimon, Chase, not so much on our side. So I think there's some truth in this. Is it really like it's like they might own 7% of Coinbase or whatever, and whatever they own of Circle and maybe even Center or whatever, however the entities work out, we'll never even understand. We'll never even see, their ownership and influence over all these different entities. But however it works out, I mean, Brian Armstrong is out there doing his own stuff too, right? Coinbase has its own super vested interest in this. So I think of it more like a bunch of different parties, all of whom are hoping for a certain outcome versus other parties like the anti-crypto army and Chase, but Chase is also divided because Jamie Dimon, he's talking very positively about crypto right now. And obviously JP Morgan Chase is doing a bunch of crypto stuff. They just don't want that yield. They just don't want the yield part of it. Okay, Hilldog says, wonder how admins securing their crypto holdings. Remember Fireblocks. Yeah, I mean, one thing I did notice when I was investigating this weekend, when I was investigating the relationship between BlackRock and Coinbase, I saw what you'd expect, that Coinbase is the custodian of BlackRock's Bitcoin. So this is a good question, though. I would like to know more about how the U.S. government is securing their crypto holdings. That's a very good question. Maybe somebody on this, maybe somebody watching right now actually knows the answer to that question, because it's definitely discoverable information. But somebody might know the answer to that a little bit. Okay, so moving on, more complications. This one actually worried me. This one worried me quite a bit. I'm not going to lie about this. This one worried me. So this post appeared like Dracula in one of those old vampire movies where he sort of just like rises out of the ground, one of those really old 1951s. He just sort of like, slowly rises. This post said this: news, Tim Scott's crypto market structure push has a Chuck Grassley problem. As soon as I saw the name, I was like, oh God. This is a problem, and I'll tell you why. So continue the post first, though. The Senate Judiciary Chair is raising substantive and jurisdictional concerns alongside Rick Durbin about the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, which is in Scottsville. Here's the problem with this. Chuck Grassley is 92 years old. Dude is in his 90s. That means he was out chasing. He was old enough to be out chasing ladies before World War II. That's how old Chuck Grassley is. You think he gives a damn about something like crypto? Think he understands what crypto is, cares what crypto is, even finds anything like that desirable? Not at all. This dude is 92 years old. He is not going to be on our side. I would not. I'd love it if he, started doing YouTube videos where he's talking about his, like ledger devices. That'd be great. But I'm going to go ahead and guess that Chuck Grassley is not on our side at 92. Not that you couldn't be a crypto person at 92. God bless any crypto person who's 92 years old. But I'm going to go ahead and guess that Chuck Grassley here with his red tie and his red vest, I'm going to guess he is not highly in favor of crypto. This is kind of a problem. And I kind of looked into his technical issues and the remit of his committee and how he thought it related to the bill. And there's some legit issues there. It's problematic. I'm not going to lie. So here's where we are. It's been a busy weekend again. See, this person had it right. Whoa, Grassley is still alive. They didn't know. Not only did they not know he was still in the Senate, but they didn't even know he was still alive. And this person also points out BRCA is a red line for the crypto community. So this is kind of a problem. We'll see how this all pans out. Nothing's going to happen this week because they're on recess for the holiday. So we're not going to see anything this week, but next week, the Ag Committee is going to mark up their bill. And the Banking Committee is, I'm guessing, going to be going pretty hot on their side of it. So next week's going to be busy. This week, apparently, we're not going to see much. But there's going to be quite a bit. We've got to go through with this Clarity Act. So Joe says, I'm glad you read out the posts because I listened to you at the gym. Laugh out loud. Okay. I always know, I try to keep in mind that there's a lot of people probably listening and not able to watch the video. So I apologize if I ever show something on the screen and talk about it and don't tell you what it is. I'm sure I do that occasionally, and I apologize for that. I'll try to keep reading the things that people need to hear. So fly over me. Thank you for joining. Let's go. Durbin has been a senator here in Illinois for a long time. He's awful, but at least he's not running again. There you go. Severed Tom Cardiac from the perspective of the represented gives you his take on Durbin. Yeah, these guys are so old. I mean, God, we need term limits. God damn, we need term limits. And it's not just the insider trading thing. It's just, you just can't have 92-year-olds like this. I mean, I can be convinced there's a 92-year-old out there who's into technology enough to be able to make policy on technology, right? I'm not trying to be ageist, but God damn, what are the chances that a 92-year-old is going to make the best policy on something like crypto? I mean, dude, it's like, when you say crypto to him, he might be thinking of that, World War cryptography going on in what's it called, Bletchley Park. That might be what he thinks we're talking about right now. He might think we're talking about Enigma machines in World War II or something. We don't know if he even knows what crypto is. Jerry says, eating overnight oats this morning for my health. Let's go. Otis Fricho says yes to term limits. I agree. Yes to term limits. Okay. Speaking of policy, we've got to go through a few policy things here. We're going to talk about some other things after this, but we're going to talk about a little Cardano. It's going to be like DRep housekeeping. So we're going to go through some things. So I voted on several things, and some of you will be very happy. I voted no on all of them, and I'm going to tell you why I voted no. So the first one, I didn't even include a section here, but there was a proposal. You'll remember we talked about it on this channel. We had to put a new person, a new party on the Constitutional Committee. And so there was a vote and somebody got elected and we put them on the Constitutional Committee. But then there was another proposal, and the logic behind the proposal was good. It was smart. It was like, hey, we're in this weird position where if somebody drops out of the Constitutional Committee, we have to do this like emergency election to elect somebody new to replace them, and no governance action can go forward till we do that. Shouldn't we just have an additional seat on the Constitutional Committee? Makes perfect sense, right? I was on board up to that point, or I could be on board up to that point. I would consider it if that had been the bill, I would have considered that issue. But the actual governance action was like all of that plus let's just place the second place person in that seat. The person who took second in the election, let's put them in there, right? And a lot of people, myself included, were like, that's not really how you're supposed to do this, right? You should say, hey, let's have an additional seat on the Constitutional Committee, and then let's have another election to put somebody in there, right? That's how you should do that from my perspective. But this governance action wasn't that. It was like, hey, let's not have another election. Let's just put the second place person in there. The problem with that is that a lot of us voted for the group that actually won. And if we did the election over, we might not have voted for that second place person. The voting might have gone in a totally different direction if that first place party was out of there, which, might be the case. So I voted no on that governance action, not because it's stupid to have an additional seat, but because I didn't think that was the right way to do it. So that was that one. So let's go on to some more, and that was, a few days ago, but these I voted on more recently because these are all more recent governance actions. So there's this 2030 strategic framework governance action, right? And this is sort of like this giant grab bag of a bunch of different ideas, right? And some of them are things that I think we'd all agree on, right? Some of these things are like this: maintain 100% mainnet uptime. I think we all agree with that. They're even like, hey, let's have a KPI. Let's have a KPI for this. Let's hit 99.9% uptime. Very few people in Cardano are going to find some weird reason to say, I'm against uptime. I want us to turn off and on like Solana. We're all going to agree on stuff like that, right? So some of these things, and of course, they're the things that you see first in this list of things in this 2030 plan. Some of these things are like that, like things we would all agree on. So you see that and you're like, okay, great. Yeah, I'm in favor of that. I'll say, yeah, let's plan for near 100% uptime for 2030. That makes sense. Nobody's going to be against that. But then we get down here to some other things, right? Like let's go to governance. And we see things like this: role-based incentives for DReps, SPOs, and Constitutional Committee. This is something that's been voted down kind of over and over again, right? This is how we lost that Constitutional Committee group to begin with. We voted no on paying the Constitutional Committee. And those guys were, very straightforward about it. They said, we're only going to do this if we get paid. If we don't get paid, we're not going to do it. We told you guys that from the start. You voted not to pay us, so we're out. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. They were straight up about it. I don't blame them at all. But we did vote no on that. People have also tried to pay the DReps. I've always voted no on that. I've always voted no on that because I don't think, it's sort of like felt a little banana republic-y to me. I mean, there's persuasive arguments as to why we should pay the DReps, but I was just like, it's too soon. Like, we don't really need to pay the DReps yet. Like, let's get governance going for a while and then we can consider that issue. I don't think we need to pay the DReps yet. But more importantly, it's a controversial issue. Many people in the community do not want to pay the DReps at all, right? This is not one of those things that everybody agrees on. Same thing with Constitutional Committee. In fact, we know this got voted down. We know this got voted down, right? And then you see kind of even some newer things, right? Like if we get down here, we see, let's see, where's it at? Okay. Multi-asset treasury. This is also a little bit controversial, right? Like there are some persuasive arguments as to why we should put different assets other than just ADA in the treasury. But also there's a lot of people that say things like the following: if Cardano is not, the Cardano community is not willing to go all in on ADA, why would anybody else be? If Cardano community is not willing to, push all its chips in, go 100% on ADA, why would anybody else go in on ADA? That's also persuasive. So allow treasury and proposals to include assets other than ADA. This is not straightforward. It's not clear that the community supports this one, right? Manage treasury. This is another one. Evolve the treasury beyond a passive single asset pool into an actively managed multi-asset portfolio to generate yields and strategically deploy capital into growth-focused investments. This is more like when I see this, what I think of is something more like a sovereign fund. And there's a lot of good arguments for a sovereign fund, but it's kind of the same issue. A lot of people are going to say, okay, sovereign fund seems like a great idea, but if we're selling ADA to acquire other things, how can we convince other people to go into ADA if the community isn't willing to be 100% into ADA? So there's persuasive arguments on both sides. I'm not saying one or the other is directionally more correct, but it's not a decided issue, right? It's not decided that we should have a multi-asset treasury, that we should have a managed treasury. Here's another one that's a little more mysterious to me. Look at this language. Refine the ecosystem's tokenomics to ensure stability. What the hell does refine the ecosystem's tokenomics mean? I'm not sure I even know what that means, right? It's like there's a lot of things about the ADA tokenomics I do not want to change. I don't know what this means, right? And then we've got SPO incentives, right? This is kind of new. Advanced programs to incentivize SPOs to diversify beyond L1 block production into supporting L2s. So, I think we all kind of want to support L2s if they're good for the ecosystem, but man, the devil is in the details on stuff like this. Like, I would have to see the details on this. Like, what exactly are you proposing? This is kind of like if, somebody in the House of Representatives, US House of Representatives, had this resolution like, let's put forward a bunch of programs to help poor people. You're like, okay, but man, the devil is in the details. That could be a lot of things I don't agree with, or it could be a lot of things. The idea is good. We all want to help poor people, but a lot of bad things could, we could end up with a lot of, leering centers in Minneapolis, as part of a program to help poor people. It's like the devil's in the details. So anyways, this whole 2030 vision thing, there's a lot of great ideas in here. Like, let's make sure we have really good uptime, let's increase adoption in a bunch of different ways. Like, we all agree on let's increase adoption, let's have really good uptime, but there's a lot of other ideas in here. I'm not sure we all agree. I'm not sure we agree on a lot of these things, right? And also, I feel like if we're passing, legislation about what we think we should be doing from now until 2030, I feel like what's going to happen, and other DReps pointed this out in their no votes. They said, hey, I don't want to pass something now in 2026. And like in 2029, when everything's totally changed in crypto, have somebody say, hey, we can't do that thing because it wasn't a part of the plan in 2026, right? I think that's also true. Like, people would beat us over the head with, you voted yes for the Cardano 2030 plan. And you're like, well, no, things have changed. It's 2029. We gotta react to these changing circumstances, and the people who don't want that are gonna be like, that wasn't a part of the 2026 plan, right? So I think this is too much of a mixed bag. I think we need to deal with these issues separately, right? Because it's not clear that everybody's on board for all of this. There are some things everybody's certainly on board for. Other things, much, much more controversial. I don't think you can pass this like omnibus, thing like, hey, a certain committee has laid out the following, 240 things. You need to either vote yes or no for all of it. It's not really a yes or no thing to me. This is like 240 different things. And true, there's some benefit to having a unified plan, but it's not clear to me that we know directionally if we even directionally are in favor of some of these things. So that's how I feel about that. Mark Going says, we need 5 nines uptime standard in credit card industry, not 99.98 uptime. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, see, even there's debate already on what kind of uptime number we should have. And on some of these other things, it's not even clear directionally what way we want to go. Thanks for saying that, Dorian. Dorian says more than 80 viewers, only 20 likes. Please hit the like button. Thank you for saying that, Dorian. I appreciate it. Matt says, we created crypto blockchain technology. The government needs to respect our sovereignty and let us navigate the details for decentralization. Yeah, I mean, the thing I keep coming back to is they need to let us build our own future like they let the internet, right? The internet, we were so lucky with the internet. There's such a small amount of regulation they could have added to the internet, to websites back in the 90s that would have crushed the internet. There's such a small amount of regulation that could have completely crippled the internet, and we would be living in 2026 and people would still be getting paper newspapers, you know. It's a very small amount of regulation can completely cripple a future. So I agree with you. They just need to let us do our thing and we'll build out a great future. It's like, we'd like to change the world if you'll let us. I think that's for sure true. Okay, so let's talk about, so I voted no on this for the reasons I just illustrated. We've also got the Cardano Constitution. So this is like version number 3 of this amendment. So I've talked about this. I voted no on each of the previous amendments, right? Because the same reasons apply now, right? We went to version 1.0, then we went to version 2, then version 2.4, and now we're on, version, I forget what version we're on now. It's like the 3rd or 4th version. I think the 3rd version we're actually voting on. So there's a lot of aspirational language in the Cardano Constitution. And these drafts from this one DRep, our largest individual DRep, always wants to get rid of all the aspirational language and change a lot of wording, and I kind of feel like Cardano is an aspirational community. And so our Constitution should also be aspirational. Maybe I'm tainted by being in North America, and I know how aspirationally the U.S. Constitution was written. And I think that's been a big part of the development of the U.S., that the Constitution was so aspirationally written. So I actually don't agree with deleting all the aspirational language in the Constitution. And there's a lot of individual substantive issues that I don't agree with, a bunch of substantive changes that I don't agree with. There's a bunch of grammatical changes that I think are fine. But here's my bigger complaint. With this. The format, when the Constitution is really important, the DReps really need to understand what they're voting for when they vote to change the Constitution. So here's the problem we start running into, right? This is the wrong format to show changes to a Constitution. And I'll show you why. I did this the last time, and I noted this in my vote the last time. Here's why you don't do this way, right? Because you read through the old version, this is this version over here in pink, and you try to understand the changes. But you read the pink and you're like, okay, this is section 1 right here. This is article 1. Where is that over here? And you can't match up the old text to the new text, right? This, purports to tell you what's been removed and what's been added, but you can't match up because the sections aren't side by side, because they're adding big blocks and deleting big blocks. You can't actually match up what's being deleted with what's being added. So it becomes very difficult to read. You can't really reconcile the changes. And what ends up happening is you read the entire old Constitution and then you read the new one and you can't really mentally track the changes. That's why legal changes in legal documents are never fucking done this way, right? You never do it this way. You get laughed out of the room if you try to change a legal document and show the changes this way. This is totally the wrong way to do this. The right way to do it is the way that it's actually done, like this. You show the changes in line. You strike words you're deleting and you emphasize words you're adding, right? Very clear. We're deleting the word for here and we're adding these other characters here, right? If we come down here, look at this. We're deleting the word trade and it's just going to read like this. It's very easy to understand the changes when you go through a document like this. This is obviously from the US government. the US Congress, this is how they understand how things are being changed, right? You need to understand changes, amendments in legislation that affects policy like this, right? What's happening right now is DReps are just sort of looking at these, these two lists of sections they're getting, and I don't believe most of them are really understanding. They would have to take the, like sort of highlight the changes over here, and then, oh, look, they can't even do that. They can't even highlight the changes and have one document to compare to the other. They've got to get kind of fancy. It's not happening. The DReps don't have time to do this, right? They don't have time to actually understand the changes because they can't even like highlight the, and like do the compare inside the word processor. So it's not happening. They're not really understanding the changes. Most DReps, not all, but I'll say some number of DReps are just looking at something like this and they're saying, how else is everybody voting? They're not even reading the document. They're not understanding the changes. But if they got a document like this, at least they can understand the changes. Like I look at this and I instantly know, oh, these sections are being deleted, right? This is all being deleted. This is the new version, right? This is being deleted. This green section will be replacing it, right? This is pretty clear. This is how you have to do legal changes in a legal document. It has to be inline like this. That other format does not work. I've noted this in every single version of this amendment. If I remember correctly, I definitely did it in the last one, and I definitely talked about it on this channel, but this is the wrong way to show changes in a legal document. This is not readable. It's not comprehensible, and the DReps are not going to understand the changes by looking at something like this, right? So I believe this is the wrong way. That was the wrong way to do an amendment. You really need to do it like this. I included this example in case anybody was unclear about what I was talking about. If somebody's not familiar with the way editing of documents is done, they've got an example. They can look at it right here. But for the substantive reasons I mentioned, I voted no on that amendment. And I also, I think this is an important topic. If we're changing the Constitution, it needs to be reflected in a way that is comprehensible to the DReps voting on it, because I can guarantee you a lot of DReps are looking at this and like in some places it matches up. Like right here, you can see it matches up, but we get down here and it's like, okay, some of this matches up, but over here, it's like, okay, some of this is being deleted, but we get clear down here. Now we're on 10 at 10 right here and section 2, and we're already on section 4 over here. I don't know what's going on, right? I can guarantee you that the DReps are not reconciling these changes and really understanding the changes. Not all of them, but some number are not even understanding the changes because of the way they're being reflected in these governance actions. So I voted no on that one. So I just wanted to go through that. I know we've talked about that before, but I think it's important. How we do governance is important. Yes, like literally every word processor will do it. It is. MS Word, just mark the document. You can do it. You don't even need MS Word. Google Docs will do it. Google Docs will mark the document for you in a way that shows all of the changes. It's very easy. Almost any word processor these days, I can't even name a legit word processor that won't do it with one click of a button. One click of a button and every edit you make is reflected in some way in line. But it's like, that's the way you got to do it. You can't do this 2 columns, 2 documents, not synced up thing. But yeah, every word processor will do it these days. And honestly, legit ones have done it since the 90s, right? Like I've literally used them to do it since the 90s. Matt says, okay. Oh, yep. Sorry, I skipped a few. Matt said, we're still developing the tech. Congress does not know jack about development or research. True. Nico, hello, Nico. Thank you for joining. Congress wants to make the rules as we are in the middle of throughput development. Congress is way too complicated for early development standpoint. Fair point. We need Congress to just give us a basic framework. Very, very well put. This is way too complicated for Congress to be involved at this point. It's way too early. They just need to give us a basic framework. With the internet, they just turned the internet loose and the internet created something beautiful. Depending on your perspective, you might say that some social media algorithmic stuff sucks, but prior to that, the internet was doing pretty well. The website thing, they left websites unregulated, and websites were pretty good for a long time. They should do the same thing for us. Matt says exactly, they're overcomplicating the regulation too early. It's almost like they're doing it intentionally to screw us up. Yep. Otis Fricio says, fiat mines are calling. See y'all next time. See you next time. Thank you for joining. Thank you for joining. So we also did see this, right? This is interesting. This is something we've always known. We've always talked about in Cardano. So this post is from a .eth poster. So we know they're not going to have a positive perspective on Solana, or probably not. You know, it's not surprising to me that they don't have a positive perspective on Solana. But what they say is something we've talked about for a long time in Cardano. Forget validators. Even if you want the recommended hardware to run a node, and they're talking about Solana, it costs about 15K. The recommended 512 gigs of RAM itself is 10K today. No one can verify Solana's state changes. It's not a blockchain. It's just a centralized database, which is run by insiders and verifiable by none. This is something we've talked about for a long time. And they're quoting another post that says Solana validator count is collapsing towards zero, 5,000 to 800 in 1 year. Running a validator keeps getting harder. Yes, of course. When the cost of running a node is 15,000 USD, you're not going to be very decentralized. The cost of running a node is going to have a direct relationship to how many nodes, how many people out there in the world are capable of running a node. So there's a reason why it's not that hard to run a node in Cardano, and we have this crazy level of decentralization. Mark Going says, but why can't we just convert over to new software standards? Would that have to be approved by the Constitutional Committee? Are you talking about on the word processing thing? You can totally include documents in the governance actions. Like, it's not a problem to include a changes marked version of the Constitution in the governance action. Like, that's very doable. It's just a choice. It's a choice of the proposer. It's a choice of the proposer to include that or not. That's my problem with the proposed governance action, is that I've mentioned this the last 2 times, I believe, definitely the last time, and I believe the first time as well. And in fact, I'm almost positive I did the first time as well. And it's so easy to do. So easy to just mark that thing up. So this also came out, right? And I think most of you probably know this was debunked pretty quickly. So we saw this original post that said various versions of this. SUI network outage caused by overdraft, Amazon Web Services AWS bill. The foundation failed to pay in time. Postmortem report. So this was debunked pretty quickly. This doesn't appear to be what actually happened, but this is the news item. A rare flaw in SUI's consensus logic caused validators to diverge on checkpoints, halting the mainnet as a safety measure. Engineers quickly fixed the issue by clearing divergent data and coordinating upgrades, restoring full operation by late afternoon with no losses, while the SUI Foundation shared a detailed postmortem on improvements. A satirical post joking about an unpaid AWS bill drew mockery from rivals and users, though critics debunked it fast. The event highlighted ongoing challenges in layer 1 reliability, even as SUI processes transactions steadily now. And of course, they would point at us saying we had our own, fork in Cardano, which is true. There was a fork incident. I would argue that we did not really shut down, right? And then you kind of get into an issue of some semantics. What does it mean for it to shut down? If half the validators are on the wrong chain and they have to be brought back to the correct chain, what does that actually mean? Is that an outage? Is it not? But the truth of the matter is that if you have to halt the mainnet, it's a slightly different matter than your blockchain suffering a temporary fork and then automatically healing itself. That's a different matter than actually halting the mainnet. And once again, I think we all kind of understand that Sui sort of set out to do some of the same things that Solana did, provide a very fast blockchain. And what we see with these very fast blockchains so far is that they have problems like this, where they have to turn the blockchain off. The blockchain actually has to halt, right? While it's super funny that it could have been over an AWS bill, the fact that it was believable that an unpaid AWS bill could have halted the network kind of tells me everything you need to know about these kinds of networks. Because nobody inside Cardano would ever believe that about Cardano. But some of these networks seem to be so centralized that I wouldn't even be shocked if this were actually true one day of a blockchain. Dolphy Wolf, good morning. It feels comfortable knowing you're my DRep. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. I hope enough ADA holders care enough to stay alert. We'll see. I honestly do not believe. I obviously have spent a decent. Okay, I won't. I'm always tempted to tell you guys more about me in the context of some of these things, but of course, I try not to do that. So I find it very hard to believe that certain DReps are actually understanding changes in some of these things. When there are a gigantic number of changes, like to our constitution, I believe a certain number of DReps, you can guess yourself, you can judge for yourself what percentage that is. They're not even understanding the changes. They're just looking at who's voted in favor or not in favor of something, and they're just going the way of the crowd, right? They're just following the herd. 100% that is happening. And you also notice certain DReps just vote yes on everything. They vote yes on almost everything. You see them in the yes column all the time. And it's sort of like there's this finger pointing, if anybody voted no on anything, it's like, the finger gets pointed at them. But we also have to ask, like, how much discretion are some of these people actually exercising if they're voting yes on everything? Right. And maybe that's the less important part. That's kind of just like a humorous anecdote from my perspective. But the more concerning part is I don't believe people are actually able to track some of these changes when we're talking about something like, a whole bunch of changes over the course of several iterations in this case, right? Because there's sort of like one document that tracks the changes from like, basically version 1 to version 2. And then I'm changing the number slightly to simplify it. And then there's a separate document that tracks the changes from version 2 to version 3. It's like, man, if you don't want people to understand the changes, that's a great way to do it. That's a great way to do it if you don't want people to understand the changes and just get them to vote yes, because it's too much trouble to understand the changes. That is not how you want to make edits in legal documents. Let me just put it that way. So, okay. So this is going on in Sui. This is going on in Solana. These go fast and turn yourself off blockchains are not having the best year. There's a little bit of a reckoning now that the meme coin casino is over. There's a little bit of reckoning. People are starting to ask questions about what these really are. What are these blockchains really? I mean, this post says it kind of perfectly. It's not a blockchain. It's just a centralized database, which is run by insiders and verifiable by none. I'm not presenting that as fact. That's this person's opinion. Everybody can kind of make their own decision, but people were sort of willing to look past that during the meme coin casino days. But now that that's over, people are like, what is this thing really? Here's Sir Corin of Cardano says, Solana is an L2. The transactions really settle on Google Big Table, which is where you have to go if you want to verify state changes from more than a few weeks ago. I wish that was satirical. I think Solana people wish that was more satirical than it is. Okay. Oh, here you go. This is important. Streetwise says, anybody want to go to the Charles talk in Tokyo on February 7th? I think that'd be great. If some Army of Spies people could go to that talk and, give us an insider perspective of what's going on, that would probably be better than us just reading what we can get on X. I would love for some Army of Spies people to go there and kind of take a look and see if they can glean any additional insider information that we couldn't have gotten, just sort of over socials. So that'd be fantastic. If anybody can go with Streetwise to the Charles talk, that would be great. So this is also kind of interesting. So I don't know how important this actually is for crypto, but this is, people have been debating this pretty hard. I just think it's kind of amusing. So this headline, apparently this was in the London Times. So this headline is Bank Must Plan for Crisis Sparked by Alien Invasion. A former analyst at the central bank is calling for strategy to prevent a financial collapse. So this is kind of interesting. You're going to see, we're starting to see a lot more on the sort of alien rumor rundown front. I know I've got to make a new alien rumor rundown video for the people who are interested. On that front, there's a lot of talk this year. Most of it is popping up because of a documentary called The Age of Disclosure. The person who made that documentary, who is also the person behind the movie Ready Player One, that person is basically going around on podcasts saying that Trump is going to be the disclosure president. At some point, that director believes that at some point Trump, he claims he's being told by people who would know, which implies like people in the White House, that Trump is going to be the disclosure president. He's going to get up and say, we are not alone. And in fact, even just tonight, there's another rumor, completely unverified, no basis to believe this is true, but there's another rumor going around just tonight that somebody's leaked the date that's going to happen as July 8th. Again, we get these kind of things all the time in the UAP kind of social media front. People are always saying disclosure is going to happen on this date, and then it doesn't happen. Everybody's like, what happened to that date? Right? This has happened every year since there's been, people talking about UFOs and aliens and UAPs, but there is a lot of that kind of chatter. So I'm not proposing that July 8th date as anything that's going to happen. I'm pointing out that there's a lot of chatter about these things. So don't say I said that was going to happen on July 8th. I'm just saying the rumor of the night, the rumor du jour is that it could happen this summer. Who the hell knows? Probably won't happen. It's never happened before, but there's a lot of chatter around these things. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see more discussion like this, right? People actually planning out like, what are the impacts on the global economic system if there is some kind of, not even alien invasion, this is a little hyperbolic, but just like disclosure. What if disclosure does happen? Undeniable disclosure happens. And, there's going to be some impacts on the markets. What are those impacts going to be? It turns out certain think tanks did this like 25 years ago. And, part of the lore is that that's why disclosure hasn't happened yet, because the think tank came to the conclusion you actually shouldn't tell people because the impact is too great. It's going to mess up the markets too much. Societal chaos will ensue. It's better not to tell people. So it's kind of interesting. This is popping up once again. I'm sure people will try to debunk this by citing the lore around that original study by the think tank in like the year 2000. It was during Bush 2. But it's kind of amusing to see sort of worlds colliding. Because of course, all the crypto people see this and they're like, yeah, crypto's the answer. If alien invasion collapses the system and all the central banks are left helpless, that's when crypto saves us. And who knows? Maybe that's true. Maybe not. So one last thing interesting before we get to that. So Streetwise says, I applied for a ticket on Midnight's website. It's open now. So if you want to go with Streetwise to Charles's talk in Tokyo on February 7th, it looks like the way to do it is to apply for a ticket on Midnight's website. So if you can be in Tokyo on February 7th, there you go. Please do if you can. So here's some little follow-up news from last week. Last week I noted the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group. You understand what this is. This is a Nimitz class carrier. That means it has like 90 aircraft on it, accompanied by a nuclear sub and a bunch of destroyers and a bunch of other ships and a huge amount of people. It left Manila a few days ago. Now it's in the Strait of Malacca, right? It's going past, Singapore, in between Malaysia and Indo here. Then it's going to go through the Indian Ocean, and it's going to be right on Iran's doorstep. So a lot of talk about what this might mean. I made a big thread. I won't bore people with it here who aren't interested in international events, but I made a huge thread about that. And the perspective of an American who's been road tripping through Iran for the last 6 days, too long, didn't read. This person says all the local protesters are telling him the body count is actually like 20,000 from the last couple of weeks. 20,000 protesters dead. So that definitely crosses Trump's red line. But of course, if you think about this situation, we've got no carriers. We've got a bunch of destroyers. There's like 3 destroyers and 1 nuclear sub already hanging out, in this area near the Persian Gulf, but no carrier strike groups. So you'll remember during the last volley of missiles back and forth between Tehran and Israel, we had multiple carrier groups in the Mediterranean, prepared to do all the missile defense stuff. Of course, no surprise that the entire Middle East would be like, hey, don't start bombing Iran now because they're going to launch some pretty serious missiles. And we only want that to happen if you've got the carriers around here to help us out with that. So I think I've seen certain estimates. People were saying that the USS Abraham Lincoln and the rest of the carrier strike group would be in the Persian Gulf in, something like the next 5 days, like Friday-ish. So anyways, we might be seeing something very dramatic, in a week or in 2 weeks. There's also a question of whether or not, another carrier strike group like the George H.W. Bush, which is currently in Virginia, whether they would try to get that carrier strike group into the Mediterranean prior to anything kicking off, but we'll see. The USS Abraham Lincoln will be there in probably the next week, and who knows if the USS George H.W. Bush might leave Virginia and start heading for the Mediterranean. But that's an update on the Iran situation. User ZD6FB says, Yo Street, I don't see anything on the Midnight webpage. You mean it's on their Discord or something? I can't find it. So it looks like, Streetwise is saying it's on the Midnight website. So I think that is about all the news we've got for the weekend. We've had some really busy weekends lately. These have not been slow weekends. Seems like since December, maybe even late November, we've had really busy weekends, and it kind of sets the tone for the rest of the week. I think this week is supposed to be slow on the legislative front, but lately we've had plenty of stuff to talk about. So I think this week will be no exception. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I hope everybody had a great weekend. I hope you're looking forward to a great rest of the week. Hilldog, thank you for joining. Omar, thank you for joining. Yeah. I hope everybody's looking forward to a great rest of the week, and I will talk to you soon.